Good evening, viewers, and thank you so much for tuning in to this live broadcast. We are coming to you from Sandton in Johannesburg in South Africa, and my name is Nakachinda. I am with the SG of the Patriotic Front, Honorable Raphael Nakachinda. You know that President Edgar Chagwa, Zambia's sixth president, passed away yesterday in South Africa, and today we are privileged to host the SG to get an update on the events surrounding the death of President Lungu and the plans for the funeral and subsequent burial. Honorable Nakachinda, you are welcome to Millennium TV live interview.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Madam Nakira, and good evening to our viewers, wherever they are watching us from. This is a very, very difficult time and period, obviously for me as an individual, for the country Zambia, as well as our party, Patriotic Front. Losing a leader and one of a kind like Dr. Edgar Chagwa is not only devastating. I want to believe that every Zambian feels gutted because obviously he has been an epitome of hope for what the Zambian people desire to achieve moving forward. But as it were, we have to face the reality of what has happened, and we're here. And thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to interact with you.
Thank you so much, SG, that you've made time. We know this is an extremely busy period for you, especially that you know you are the CEO of the party, and we know that a lot of responsibility is falling on your shoulders. Now, President Edgar Lungu, you know, died at the age of 68, and he is survived by his wife, Mrs. Esther Lungu, and children as well as grandchildren. I would also like to make mention that apart from Millennium TV, we are also live on several social media platforms. Now, SG, you know, we just want to find out, you know, what are your memories, you know, of late President Edgar?
Well, first of all, I've been privileged to have been one of the fierce critics of President Lungu at the time that he assumed office as president. Even I think at the time that he was just in cabinet under President Sata's government, and apparently he succeeded to paralyze me as an individual by exhibiting a rare sense of patriotism and selflessness as a leader during the time that we are addressing the process of amending or repealing the supreme law of the land, which is the constitution, towards 2016 elections. It so happened that prior to that, there was a technical committee set in place, to which there were recommendations that were made, and a draft constitution, which I think had generated consensus in the country that reflects the will of the people, and that the Zambian people are anticipating that it be enacted into law. There used to be a Minister of Justice at the time, Nakachinda, who made pronouncements that the draft he didn't know where it was, and that he could not then be able to present it to Parliament. President Edgar Lungu was then privileged to be appointed Minister of Justice. His pronouncements were quite unique and rare, looking at the way government ministers conduct themselves. It was more or less in a very contradictory manner, because his president, President Michael Sata, said, do we have an animal-driven constitution? But for him, as Minister of Justice says, for as long as I'm privileged to be Minister of Justice, I would definitely find a draft constitution, draft bill, and I'll present it to Parliament. Fast forward, he was privileged to be elected president before that could be actualized. On the day of inauguration, he appointed Dr. Nakachinda to be with the sole mandate that I want you to execute or actualize that which I promised as an MP, that this bill must grace the House, in this case Parliament. And when the opposition raised concerns, and I happened to be in opposition at the time, we sat with President and his ministers to discuss this bill. President Kaunda says, I don't want to interfere with this document. Let it go as it is, as proposed by the Zambian people through the technical committee. It was now the opposition that were beginning to negotiate with him that there were certain clauses within that bill that would be problematic to implement. One among them was the introduction of provincial assemblies. And I remember that time, he said, whatever you do to the document, as president, I will not allow that we produce what is called a white paper, which should be basically cabinet deciding on behalf of the Zambian people. We went to Parliament at the time through our members of Parliament from MMD, UPND, and other political parties. It was difficult to actually have the 2016 constitution not go through, because you're so sincere, so patriotic, that he even vowed that even if it meant enacting provisions of the law that will risk my return into office, I will still proceed to have this law enacted. That period of engagement alone paralyzed every effort to politic and criticizing. That's one of the fundamental reasons for which I surrendered. I said, this is a man I can work with. And it's from that moment onwards through to his death that there are many other things I can talk about. Even when it comes to good term, he was totally surrendered to the will of the people. When it comes to infrastructure, I think it's something that we cannot even talk about. One of the greatest virtues of leadership that he exhibited as president was the risk he was willing to take to entrust responsibilities in the hands of young people. For as long as he saw talent and he saw their leadership qualities, he would basically entrust. And there are many people we can talk about. The Kamuombes of this world, the Binu Mpundus, Boman Musambos, all these people that were entrusted with the responsibility of leadership, where others never saw that this could actually serve. And the list is endless. So when it comes to memories I have of President Kaunda, I think I'll betray myself if I don't speak to this unique virtue of humility and selflessness. He did not just exhibit it around issues of enacting the law, but even when it came to at the time that it was critical for him, obviously where he's offered the position of leadership, he always carried this attitude of saying, it can't just be me, it can be another person. In 2014, after Mr. Sata died, remember he was acting president, there was a debate and some kind of tension in the nation, where people suggested that as minister he could not remain as acting president and needed to allow the Vice President, Guy Scott, to act as as president. He did not argue, even when the law clearly allowed him to remain in that office. He said, colleagues, take it. His ascendance to presidency in 2014, 2015 was basically clearly as a result of a clear mandate from the people, because he himself was even saying, please don't push me. And those who were very close in that process will tell you that many times he told me, please, it's not a do or die situation for me to be president. Let another person, if these people want to fight for it, take it. That rare virtue, up to his death, you see it by the way he interacted with others when he came back to active politics. He would always say another person could, take it. So those are some of the areas of great fond memories.
Great stuff, but SG, I would also like to know your personal, relationship with the late President Lungu. What sort of personal, memories do you have? Fond memories do you have of the late president?
I think what I've said seems to be more from a personal perspective, but I think I can then transpose and say I don't think there's any Zambian out there who disputes that President Edgar Lungu carried this sweet spirit, a simple, reachable, amiable person. And his humility, his simplistic way of looking at things was a strength, but for some people they perceived it to have been a weakness, to the point where if there's a president that was abused, code names, contrary to who he really was President Lungu. There are people who up to today when you interact and talk to them, they will describe a president or Edgar Lungu in a manner that is totally contradictory to who he was. And they would only be converted when they have the opportunity to interact with him at personal level. One such person that I remember in a recent conversation, and sorry for embarrassing, is Mr. Nakachinda, who openly confessed that at the time he was president, they criticized him so much that they thought this person is irresponsible and so on. When he had the opportunity to interact with President Lungu in opposition, and later on he also, facilitated for, Archbishop Telephone Pondo to interact with President Lungu, and many milestones were achieved, which of course we don't have the time to discuss. In the privacy of their conversation, Mr. Tangana says they confessed to each other, Archbishop, to say, is the person we were talking to and we interacted and are interacting with the same person that we're criticizing when he was in government. That's the character of this man. At a distance, he seemed to have carried this demeanor that was deceptive. People looked at him like, the way they described him. But when you come, close and go into his history, there are many things he achieved at individual level that people never knew. He was in his school, one of the best students from secondary school through to university. After asking Takabimba, he was one of the best students at university in their class, as a law student. He cleared the first time he attempted this year with, distinctions or, merits, if you like. But as it were, he was criticized and abused. But I think those who have interacted with him, why is it that President Edgar Lungu is loved by Zambians generally without any effort? It is that simplistic nature of the man. And I think many people attest and speak to many other virtues that really causes all of us in Zambia to really be devastated. And the fact that his untimely death is one that is very difficult for us to comprehend.
Now, President Lungu, was president of Zambia from 2015 when he took over the reins of power from, late President Sata, and he was re-elected in 2016 up to 2021. In his 7 years of presidency, many people say that his biggest legacy was infrastructure development. But there are other people that have argued that during his, quest to develop, the country's infrastructure, he had a lot of debt under his government. What is your comment? What legacy as the Patriotic Front do you feel President Lungu has left, and how do you want and wish the people of Zambia to remember this foreign hero?
I think under his leadership there was even a mantra that was coined, Sontopo, if you remember. That was his theme in 2016 towards the election, Sontopo. And up to today, President Lungu doesn't need to explain himself to anybody about his achievement and evidence of the developmental drive he undertook as president with his team. It's there for everybody in Zambia to see. Of course, we had in opposition very critical, rivals, if you like, political rivals, who had also deployed a very effective propaganda machinery that led them to form government in 2021 through what the Zambian people have come to conclude now, lies, deceit, and all that. They attempted, and I think to some extent tried to paint in black. They deployed that machinery both locally and internationally. There are perceptions that have been held, even here in South Africa, because of the fact that that machinery was able to deploy certain media houses in South Africa, because one of the greatest supporters of the now ruling government, UPND, are domiciled in South Africa. And they're in control of some of the media houses in South Africa. There was a narrative being carried, or wanting to suggest that President Lungu was interfering with law enforcement agencies and so on. But we have now been faced with the real interference with law enforcement agencies. And now people have come to realize, I think there was no interference under President Kaunda, because consistently he said, let the law enforcement agencies do their job professionally. So in terms of development, across all provinces, including provinces that, in terms of politics, did not really give him good numbers. He emphasized that the only way to win them on your side is to take more development there. Under his reign, you saw capital projects being taken into Southern Province, capital projects being taken into Western Province, capital projects and certain project, programs being taken into Western Province, part of Central Province. For him, he believes that those that seemingly are devalued as a leadership, we must find a way to extend the hand and lift them up. Because in developing a nation, it's a win-win situation. You can't, after being given a mandate to govern, you begin to oppress those that you perceive never supported you. That was not the philosophy of President Kaunda. The philosophy of President Kaunda was to promote unity. It was demonstrated in how he treated former presidents, for example, whether it was Dr. Kaunda, RB, and all that. He is the first president who didn't have any conflict, visible or imaginary, with the former presidents. He honored them. RB, to his death, appreciated, the kind of treatment and honor he received from, President Kaunda. Remember President Kenneth Kaunda saying, this young man, he has treated me right. And one day he was being compelled at showgrounds during the day of national prayer in repentance and reconciliation, where Dr. Kaunda was compelled to pray for the nation, because I think he felt truly appreciated as a founding father. He poured out his heart to pray for the nation and pray for President Kaunda. Because biblically, if you want to obtain a blessing from your parent, there is a demeanor and attitude you are supposed to exhibit, that of honor, that of respect, and acknowledging the input they made in your lives. I think President Lungu helped this country to have the founding president's heart unlock and bless our nation because of the attitude that he exhibited towards it. I think that's part of the things we can talk about in terms of his contribution to the nation.
Great. Now, Honorable Nakachinda, you as a CEO of the Patriotic Front and the person who is close to President Lungu and possibly the family, I would just like to ask on behalf of the Zambian people, in your view, was President Lungu a happy man even at the time of his death? What are your personal thoughts on this?
I think I would say it this way. President Edgar Lungu was at peace with his God. And one of the reasons why he could stomach the humiliation, embarrassment, and the kind of anguish and torment you're subjected to by our friends at the government is that President Lungu, unlike the perception out there, was quite a very devoted person when it comes to his faith. And he relied on his relationship with God so much that many times he would always refer to the fact that let the will of God prevail. And he never really sought, like others we've seen, to try and defend himself. I think he preferred to live with a clean and clear conscience than to try and present himself in a particular way to the public. And to say that he died an unhappy man, I think it would be misrepresenting him. But to say that he died as a person who regretted that this country should never at this particular stage be driven in the direction of vindictiveness, of vengeance, and clear retribution. I think that he regretted. He seemed to have carried a sense of responsibility that maybe there are certain things he never did right as president to have allowed what has happened to the country and the kind of division our country seems to be experiencing and the trajectory we're taking. So to that effect, I can say that he really felt he needed to do something about it. He's coming back to active politics, even when he had vowed that he had done his time and that he needed to allow other people to take leadership in the party and in the nation. He was compelled because clearly the Mingalatos and everything were taking center stage, and he felt using the affluence and influence that he had and the experience he had as president, he would be able to contribute to forestall the degeneration that began to manifest in a manner that was dangerously so being experienced by every Zambian. So he died regretting. He died hoping that something can be done about it. And if we are really to honor him as our leader, honor him as a person, I think his desire and vision must be able to be achieved. And in this case, it can only be achieved if we embrace some of the virtues that describe who he was, being selfless. He was not over ambitious, President Kaunda. He was one who, if you proved that he could do the job better than you, he would be willing to subordinate his personal interest or ambition to allow you to play that role. I think those are the virtues that all of us must embrace, that as we move forward, we should not allow personal interests, personal ambitions, and so on to undermine unity and the collective vision that I think our leader tried to articulate to all of us that should be the guiding light. You would hear it in him, in his tone, in his passionate appeal around issues of unity. Whenever there were clear signs of people maybe being petty, trivial in approach to certain matters, and clearly creating divisions, he would always be calling everybody, why? I think the why and why questions from President Kaunda must be answered by all of us by ensuring that out of this tragedy, we can emerge even more grounded in terms of virtues of leadership and also certain attributes that will help us to help the country as we move forward. I think that is what he would desire to see if he is to rest in peace in the bosom of the Lord.
Now, Honorable SG, you are the Secretary General of the Patriotic Front. The Patriotic Front has, it's not a secret now that it has suffered a major blow with the demise of its torchbearer, in the person of President Edgar Chagwa. What does this mean for the Patriotic Front? I can tell you that social media in certain sections is awash with people speculating that this could actually be the end of the Patriotic Front. As Secretary General, where is the Patriotic Front party at now with the demise of its torchbearer?
I think first of all, we are in mourning. We are in mourning. But you see, we are also in mourning when we lost power in 2021. And there were speculations and predictions that that's the end of PF. And we're still here. There's been efforts to destabilize PF, but we're still here. President Lungu, outside what I talked about, he was also good at assembling teams. And like I said, identifying talent. I'm very confident that those prophets of doom and those who wish evil of PF, as well as the other opposition partners that are working with us in Tonse, and those who are collaborating with us generally in opposition, those who wish that to disintegrate and not be united, I think their thinkings or their wishes, I can describe them as wishful thinking. There's a lot of determination. There's a lot of desire by the Zambian people to see that there's unity among the leaders, and there's a clear alternative to this government in 2021. And I think as we mourn President Nakachinda, that's one of the things that should be embedded in our hearts and generate enough conviction that I think we need to up the game. When everybody else, the UPND and everybody wants to go low, let's aim to go high. Let's not degenerate with those who don't mean well for the country. Ultimately, Zambian people are looking for nationalists, they're looking for patriots, they're looking for Pan-Africanists, they're looking for people who are not searching for negativities in others, but those who are searching for positives and the attributes that can contribute to the well-being of the country. And I think if we can emphasize that, there's nothing insurmountable that we cannot achieve collectively. And PF, we may deceive you by the way we engage each other robustly. At the end of the day, we still come back to the table of dialogue and find a solution. That's what you saw when Mao Sata came back. That's what you saw prevailed in 2014 to 2015. It will still prevail now. We learned lessons after Mr. Sata died. I don't think there's anybody who wants to replicate that. There will be a smooth, carryover from where President Lungu left. Remember, we're talking of Plan B. President Lungu was not joking when he said Plan B. There are certain things we can discuss now. But I think he seemed to have been a prophet himself, because certain templates and situations seem to have been discussed and besieged his mind, his heart, and here and there things are in place to make sure that Zambians are not left completely, orphaned and desperately without any direction that they can take.
Now, Honorable Nakachinda, the people of Zambia wish to know, the funeral arrangements for the late, sixth Republican President of Zambia, His Excellency Dr. Edgar Lungu. What, arrangements have been made, for his, funeral and subsequent life?
We are grappling with a lot of areas of consideration. Obviously, as a party, and I'm aware the family too, President Lungu had to more or less sneak out of the country to just try and save his life. From 2022, our government back home, we are determined never to allow President Lungu to travel, not even for his medical check. Remember one time he attempted to travel when he was under the weather and things were not really good. And obviously he knew that at his age, there were certain areas he needed management. He was plucked out of the plane. Even when his luggage had already been whatever, he had already been cleared. They even pretended like, no, I think let's say we had to accord you protocol and so on. They took him in the holding room, not knowing that they are actually removing his bags and so on and banned him from traveling. So he opted after a year to write to the president and the cabinet that allow me to go for my medical checkup. Behind with all these things, and I think my health should be prioritized over all these political things that we seem to be dealing with. The government was explicit and refused that he couldn't go for medical checkup. I think the evidence is there. It had to take the presence of the UN rapporteur who was in the country trying to investigate about human rights, whatever. And I think at that particular point he said, can I maybe attempt to go to the airport? I am personally persuaded that the only reason he crossed through the immigration processes is because they were fearing that had he been reported having been denied to come out of the country, it would go on record of the rapporteur. So he basically, took a chance and came here. The health practitioners indicated, and the family has been kind enough to be open about it, that at the time they came, they were saying, we are now dealing with a situation that has become complex. Had he come earlier, this would have been averted. The lack of responsibility of some of the people who made the decision never to allow them to go for medical checkup possibly can be held responsible for aiding what has happened. Because clearly it was a preventable situation, but as it were, in humility took all the blows and all the humiliation, awaiting that one day his fate will be on the basis that God is gracious and so on. That's where we are. It's amazing that even when he came here, nobody was showed care was him. His young brother, HH, didn't even bother to try and, apart from trying to mock his sickness. And I'm saying this, I know the cultural arrangement in Zambia is that some of these things are never discussed when you're mourning. But I think as a country, a Christian country, we must be inclined towards telling the truth. President Lungu was humiliated, President Lungu was tortured, President Lungu was not cared for by his government, which is supposed to be the representative of the people. The Zambian people were misrepresented when it came to the health of the former president. Because I think if you ask all the Zambians, they would ask President Lungu to be careful. After all, these people are government, they use the taxpayers' money, your money, my money. It was not their money. They didn't have the right to try and behave as though they are doing President Lungu a favor. As a servant of the people had said that the highest court, the highest office of the land of president, he deserves a little better. In his death, we have a foreign affairs minister coming, their statements back home suggesting government was to take over and so on, want to suggest it's an entitlement. They took away all the entitlements of the former president. And Aimbe, who came here, is the one who was even boasting in a mockery manner, announcing those things. Today, in a sheepish manner, they are here, trying to suggest they want to take over funeral arrangements. The family are at pain to reconcile between the treatment they received up to just yesterday and the guest that's been offered to them. And that's how come it's very difficult even for the party or anybody to negotiate them out of the seemingly decisions are made that they don't want government to have anything to do with the funeral arrangements. So far we are aware that both the family and the well-wishers, they are working tirelessly to make sure that all the arrangements to do with preparing, the moving of the body back home, and all the requirements will be undertaken by the family. There are certain things obviously the family may not have control over. President Lungu had friends, some of whom held high offices of president, kings, prime ministers, and so on, who are bound by protocols, SADC protocol, AU protocols, and all those things in terms of how they get into another country. That we will not debate. But I think for us as a party, we respect every decision that the family makes, because I think it brings closure. It's very difficult to deal with hypocrisy. And especially if you embrace it, as if you are not aware of what just happened yesterday. I think the President Lungu himself, at least personally, I can attest to the fact that sometimes when he just decided to joke around issues of his life and death, he would say, I don't want anybody, especially after President Nawaki died, I don't want you guys to allow such a thing that happened to President Nawaki to happen to me, to where people who actually were leading and happily so taken her to the grave. In instances when they needed to show mercy, in instances when they needed to show grace, they actually showed, wrath, they showed ridiculousness, and actually, seemingly in many ways than one, were wishing her to end up in the grave. I don't think we should tolerate that. I am saying this just to probe the conscience of those on government and all of us in Zambia. Is this something we want to accept? Even if it's just for political expedience. We have had the former vice president and some of these people who have made very careless statements over things that they should have risen above political interest and personal interest and be able to provide guidance on how we should set the right precedents so that the country heals and the country begins to move in the right direction. Because some of these things happen in other countries. President Trump, as former president, was accorded all the courtesies even if he was competing with his predecessor. You understand what I'm saying? In Ghana, President Mahama has even come back into government. He was president before, in opposition, he remained president of a political party, but accorded all the courtesies of a former president. I think it's good practice. It happens in Malawi, it happens to other. What is wrong with Zambia? Who has tested us to a point where you know the fate of a president when he leaves office? I can predict to you that unless something dramatic happens, we produce a leadership which I'm confident will, that will come and treat our candidate each and every differently. Regardless of the evil he has caused on other people and the injury he has caused, for purposes of setting a new pace, we need to start, afresh and do things differently. And President Edgar Chakalungu desired that. I tell people privately and otherwise that if President Lungu had become president again, he would have demonstrated a higher standard in treating even the very person who was president, because I heard him talk about it, passionately so, that you would want to set the correct tone. And he had demonstrated when he was president. Look at how he treated the RRB, treated Kenneth Kaunda and so on. So it was already demonstrated. It just needed to be replicated for purposes of making sure that we get it, that there's a different way we can approach things. So I think there are many things that we have to learn, and the only way we can resolve what we're talking about is being brutally honest with one another. When I saw my brother Aimbe today, and hopefully we should be able to interact a little later, the questions that were asked were befitting. You have come, in what capacity? What are you offering? Is this an entitlement, or you're doing it gratuitously? Is it just out of sympathy? If it's an entitlement, are you being selective? You didn't do anything that is deemed to be an entitlement to the former president. Now in his death, you are choosing to do all these things. I think it's important that this debate during this time is exhausted, even if it's for a day or two, so that we can come up with a path through which His Excellency the President will be mourned with a clear conscience by everybody. I think I would be a little daring to even discuss such kind of things.
Secretary General for the Patriotic Front, Honorable Raphael Mangani Nakachinda, on Millennium TV discussing, the demise of 6th President of the Republic of Zambia, His Excellency Dr. Edgar Chakalungu, who died yesterday, 5th of June 2025. My name is Nakiwa Simpuwe. Thank you so much for having made time to join us for this very important exclusive interview. And SG, thank you so much for making time to just have this discussion with us.
Thank you very much, and we keep on praying that our country remain peaceful, and also our members across the country exhibit unity and mourn our president with dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.